Awesome. All right, welcome everyone. So where we're going to be picking up today is on page 155, but we're not going to be spending a whole lot of time on 155. We're going to be bouncing. So I know, I just wanted to let you know ahead of time so you're emotionally prepared for all the bouncing that's going to be happening. So 155, second full paragraph, when our friend related his experience. So page 155, second full paragraph, when our friend related. Oh gosh, no worries. Just glad you're here. Don't stress about it. Alrighty. So what's happening at this moment in the book and at this moment in time? Well, our intrepid co-founders have entered the picture. I'm going to try to make it sound exciting. And so what happened? Well, it is exciting. I don't have to try that hard, But so our homie, he doesn't have to be your homie, but he's my homie, Billy Dubs, Bill Wilson. He travels all the way to Akron, Ohio, and he's 6 months sober. And in those entire 6 months, he was trying to carry the message to other alcoholics. He was trying to help them, but nobody was staying sober. And he goes to Akron, Ohio, the rubber capital of America, and he's going to combine these different companies, and he's going to put them together, and he's finally going to make some money after 6 months of sobriety and 6 months of struggling financially and 6 months of struggling in business. And it's going to come into fruition. But unfortunately, it got bogged down in lawsuits and fighting and arguments, and Bill Wilson's reputation that he spent 6 months building have been dragged through the mud. And he's sitting in this hotel in Akron, Ohio, the Mayflower Hotel. He doesn't have enough money to pay his bill. He doesn't know what's going to happen or how he's going to get home. And he can hear the call of the bar. The laughter from the bar, the clink, clink, clink on the glass. And in that moment, he is restored to sanity because he had worked those 6 months trying to carry this message to others. And we'll go into more detail today about the series of phone calls. And we know I'm going to be talking about my girl, Henrietta Seiberling. We know. How could I not? But he makes a series of calls. And this series of calls leads him to Dr. Bob. And in that, they have a meeting, and they have a meeting at the Seiberling guest house, the gatehouse, sorry. It's a house literally right by the gate. And they have a meeting there. It's a small house on this huge estate. When we were visiting, they had an 1800s baseball tournament. So baseball was being played by 1800s rules, and it was a tournament. That's how big it was. It was huge. And so they meet at this gatehouse, and Bill Wilson explains what it means to be an alcoholic. He explains the allergy, and he explains the obsession of the mind. And we're going to see as we pop over to Dr. Bob's nightmare, because spoilers, that's where we're going. We're going to explore this story from Dr. Bob's perspective. But page 155, first full paragraph. When our friend related his experience, the man agreed. So when Bill Wilson related his experience with alcoholism, the man who is Dr. Bob agreed that no amount of willpower he might muster could stop his drinking for long. And that is a step one experience. That concession that I cannot stay sober on my own willpower. That concession that I have the obsession of the mind. Welcome, everyone. We're on page 155. That is a step one experience. That I have to stay sober. I need to stay sober. I want to stay sober, but on my own power, I can't stay sober. So that concession, that no willpower he might be able to muster could stop his drinking for long, that is a step one experience. And it says, a spiritual experience he conceded was absolutely necessary. So he could concede that to overcome the obsession of the mind, to get freedom from the obsession of the mind, what he needed was a spiritual experience. And right there is a step two concession. He doesn't have the spiritual experience yet. He doesn't have it, but he believes it is possible. And that's really as simple as the second step is. And it says, but the price seemed high upon the basis suggested. Now, if you're wondering, what does that look like? We're going to get into some detail, but what that looks like is having a look at the steps on the wall and thinking, oh, I don't want to do all of that. Yikes. Or, sitting down to do inventory and it's like, oh man, this is going to be a lot of work. Or the thought of like, I got to make an amends to my ex. Ugh, no, thank you. So that's what he's talking about. Like the price seemed high. So that hesitancy, that unwillingness to really dive in to this way of life. He told about how he lived in constant worry about those who might find out about his alcoholism. He had, of course, the familiar obsession that few knew of his drinking. Isn't that the case? We just think we are like the CIA, like our drinking is locked down. Never mind being topless on a table, but they don't know. You know what I mean? And so what was he afraid of? Because that's really what it is. Whenever I don't want to speak in absolutes because I find a lot of times that's not helpful. But I will say that more often than not, when I have resistance to a spiritual action in the 12 steps, or I work with people who have resistance to a spiritual action in the 12 steps, it's fear. It's almost always fear. And so what is Dr. Bob afraid of? Dr. Bob is afraid of the 9th step. He's afraid to make amends because he's afraid that if he tells, goes and makes amends, that people are going to find out about his drinking and his work would be ruined. Again, spoilers, people already do. And if you're wondering, what was Dr. Bob's profession? It was a proctologist, more specifically a colorectal surgeon. And I'm just going to let you know, most people want a sober butt doctor. Just going to throw that out there. So, I mean, his business was in trouble, but that was happening well before. So he said, why, he argued, should he lose the remainder of his business only to bring still more suffering to his family by foolishly admitting his plight to the people from whom he made his livelihood? And we hear that. We hear that sometimes, in ourselves, in our sponsees in the rooms, where it's like, I'm willing to go to any lengths, but just not that. And it is these things that on the surface of it sound reasonable. No, I don't want to make amends to that sort of person, or I don't want to make any financial amends. Who needs to do that? And on the face of it, it sounds logical. But we're living a new way of life. And that new way of life is I have to go deeper. And so when he says he would do anything but that. And so he would do anything, he said, but that. So he's willing, but not willing to go to any lengths. So this is often where I like to bounce around and go to page 178, because let's see what happens. And let's see what happens in grave detail on Dr. Bob's adventures with avoiding the 9th step. Welcome, guys. We are just popping over to page 178. And I know that nobody here could ever relate to avoiding a 9th step amends. You guys are always on it. Never put that sort of thing off. So, page 178, and we're going to go to the first full paragraph because I think it's helpful to sort of lead our way into it, and we'll explore some more of the history and some more of the story. So it says, first full paragraph 178. It says about the time of the beer experiment. And if you're wondering, what's the beer experiment? Oh, he just thought he would drink beer because nobody ever got drunk on beer. And he want to run a beer experiment? He got drunk and bloated. That is the results of the beer experiment. But around that same time, I was thrown in with a crowd of people. Now that crowd of people is the Oxford group of Akron, Ohio. And this is around the year of 1933. He's thrown into the Oxford group of Akron, Ohio. And just for those that are perhaps not married to a history husband, or those who are not familiar, what's the Oxford group? The Oxford group was a group of religious people who whose focus, the thrust of what they were about, was about surrendering and dedicating and having an experience of the God of their understanding. That's what they were about. And they had a series of actions that any human being could take that would allow them to live this surrendered life, that would allow them to have this experience of a power greater than themselves, which they would have called God. And so their prime focus was not about alcoholism, but there were some alcoholics who had gotten sober in the Oxford group. So that I just want to put some of that context in. And yes, the Oxford group, we took a lot of these ideas, and from those ideas came our 12 steps. So around the time of the bear experiment, I was thrown in with a crowd of people who attracted me because of their seeming poise, health, and happiness. And I want to point something out. So I'm gonna make a bit of an equivalency. Essentially, he's going to meetings, and he's attracted by what he sees in the meetings. Not in what they are saying, but how they are living. They are living as miraculous demonstrations of this power. They are living happy and poised. Listen, to be fair, I will get happy. I don't think people are calling me poised. I don't think I qualify for that. But some of y'all, I know some of y'all are poised. You are. And that happiness, that health, that they have that. And we're going to talk about more about what these people demonstrated with how they lived, not simply what they said. So they spoke with great freedom from embarrassment. I have been told. I have been told that. More in the context of you should probably be more embarrassed than you are. I'm just teasing. But that freedom from self-consciousness, that freedom from the bondage of self. And he says, which I could never do. They seemed very much at ease on all occasions, and they appeared very healthy. More than these attributes, they seemed to be happy. I was self-conscious and ill at ease most of the time. My health was at the breaking point, and I was thoroughly miserable. I sensed they had something I did not have, from which I might readily profit. And I want to point something out. Dr. Bob is being driven to the end of himself. He's living in the horrors of the allergy and the obsession. He's being ravaged by alcohol. But when he talks about being thoroughly miserable and self-conscious and ill at ease, what he's wrapped up in is those bedevilments. Those bedevilments. He's wrapped up in selfishness and self-centeredness. He's wrapped up in Dr. Bob. It's Dr. Bob on Dr. Bob, and he's got no freedom from himself. That's where he's living. And he shows up to these Oxford group meetings, and he said healthy and happy like several times. Like not just once. I mean, these are some healthy, happy people. And I'm just going to throw out, I know Dr. Bob was probably not doing so well physically, especially because of the beer experiment with the bloating. But I don't think he means, listen, you could tell that they were doing their Pilates over there. I mean, if you like Pilates, you do it. I'm not shading Pilates. But I think it wasn't that so much that physically healthy, but that spiritual health that pervades. Do you know what I mean? That joy, that light, that happiness, that that is, I think, what he was seeing. And alcoholism is doing its work on Dr. Bob. It's taking him again and again and again to the end of himself. He doesn't have all the pictures of what it means to be an alcoholic yet. He doesn't have the picture of truly what it means to suffer from an allergy and, more importantly, an obsession. He does not have that missing piece, but he sees and senses that there is a solution. And I just want to point out, I feel that, and I won't speak to everyone, but I feel like that's my responsibility. My responsibility, not as somebody special, because I'm not. I'm just a silly little drunk. But my responsibility as a recovered alcoholic is to be a demonstration, not to lie, not to wear a mask, not to pretend, but to be a demonstration of this way of life, to be a demonstration of God's power, to show up with that happiness, that freedom from embarrassment. Okay, maybe not poise. I don't got that. But to show up in those, that like kindness, compassion, that light, that love that is not me, but that flows through me. That's how I feel that I'm called to show up. Do I always show up like that? Probably not. Probably not. But to work these 12 steps in such a way where that flows through me, where I'm not putting on airs, where I'm not where I'm not pretending to be somebody that I'm not. That's what they're doing. He sees that there's something real, something genuine. And I'm just going to throw it out. Alcoholics, we can smell the BS. I was just like trying to find a way to not say a bad word. That was the best I could get. We can smell it. We can smell when people are putting on airs. We can smell when people are lying. We see that because we do it, right? We got it. And so he sees there's something there. He says, I learned it was something of a spiritual nature. And is this not all of our responses to finding out that Alcoholics Anonymous is something of the spiritual nature? It says, which did not appeal to me very much. And Dr. Bob, of the co-founders, he was the one that was far more religious. He was far more interested in organized religion, especially after he got sober. He was very involved in the Oxford group. But his response is just like so many of us. Oh, I'm not really into this whole God thing, but I thought it could do no harm. Well, it's not going to make anything any worse. I gave the matter much time and study for the next 2.5 years, but I still got tight every night nonetheless. So he was throwing himself in this thing. Now, keep in mind, he had no interest in doing amends, because when Bill Wilson shows up, he's not doing amends when he realizes he has to. But one of the things is Dr. Bob suffered terribly from insomnia, and I believe even into his sobriety. And so he was a voracious reader. And he was also a doctor. So he was a very, very intelligent man. And he went to some of the top universities in the United States at that time. And he was reading all about alcoholism, and he was learning all about religion and all about the Oxford group and anything that he could find, and none of it was sufficient to keep him sober. And for me, the equivalency is a little like Dr. Bob just going to meetings. And if you're able to just go to meetings and stay sober off that, amazing, wonderful. But Dr. Bob wasn't. Dr. Bob has this illness. And he had the obsession of the mind that would take him back again, and again, on a daily basis back to that first drink. And hanging out with some sober, happy people wasn't enough. He needed that psychic change. He needed that spiritual awakening. So I gave the matter much time and study for the next 2.5 years, but I still got tight every night nevertheless. I read everything I could find and talked to everyone who I thought knew anything about it. My wife became deeply interested. And I was reading, you can find, oh gosh, it's such a weird sentence. You can find her diary. I'm like, that seems intimate and personal. It's more of a journal where she took notes. But you can find Ann Smith's journal. And there's a gentleman who turned it into more of a book that's kind of easier to read. And Ann Smith was often referred to as the mother of Alcoholics Anonymous because she was all in for the Oxford group and all in and had been doing all these things and was like, hey, come on. When Bill and Bob got it together, she's like, all right, guys, you got to do your quiet time in the morning. Let's go. She had that experience and was deeply interested and deeply spiritual. So it says, my wife became deeply interested, and it was her interest that sustained mine, though at no time I sensed it might be an answer to my liquor problem. How my wife kept her faith and courage during all those years, I'll never know. But she did. If she had not, I know I would have been dead long ago. For some reason, we alcoholics seem to have the gift of picking out the world's finest women. And at this moment, what I would like to do is take off my little AA hat and go find my Al-Anon hat somewhere. It's like, The world's finest women. How did you know? I'll take that off. I'll put the AA hat back on. I know. I know what I bring to the table. It's all good. Alrighty. And it says, why they should be subject to the tortures we inflict upon them, I cannot explain. And we actually explored that quite a bit in the chapter 2 Wives. The idea that those who are as bound to the alcoholic as the alcoholic is bound to alcohol are suffering at root from the same spiritual malady. It's not limited to alcoholics. They're suffering from that same conscious sense of separateness from God. And where they're trying to get their sense of ease and comfort is not from the bottle like where we get it for us, but from the relationship. Perhaps the control in the relationship or the validation in the relationship or what it is. And it oftentimes there is bound to the alcoholic as we are bound to alcohol. So it says, about this time, a lady called up my wife one Saturday afternoon. Now that lady is my homegirl, Henrietta Seiberling. And as I was talking about last week, she was a difficult woman. And I just got a soft spot for difficult women and probably some relation. I'm calling myself difficult. That's what I'm doing. And she was a difficult Oxford group woman. And I think part of what got her so interested in the Oxford group is she had a very unhappy marriage. Very unhappy marriage. She was married into this huge, I was going to say oil and gas. I live in Alberta. This huge tire family. Because Akron, Ohio, rubber capital of America. They were all about these tires. And yeah, it was a deeply unhappy marriage. And from that, she leaned hard into the Oxford group, into her spirituality. And it's just for me another reminder that God uses difficult people. Here I am. God uses difficult situations. God uses all of it. And so how does this series of phone calls go? Well, Bill Wilson, he's pacing the Mayflower Hotel. He is riddled with the obsession of the mind. It's on him. But because he had been carrying this message to others, because he had been 12-stepping and doing this deal, he's restored to sanity. He makes a series of phone calls. Bill Wilson, he calls a gentleman by the name of Reverend Walter Tunks. So he calls up this reverend. And Reverend Walter Tunks, he calls up a different gentleman by the name of Norman Shepherd. And I heard this part from Henrietta Seiberling herself, because you can listen, there's an audio of an interview that her son did with her. And that's how it is not just historical people that she was a little difficult. You can hear it in the tape. She was like, yeah, and then this guy tried to get a hold of another preacher and he didn't help at all. That's not very Christian. She's there and she's judging, and I just love her. I think she's great. But Norman Shepherd called up Henrietta Seiberling. And as we spoke about this last week, she answers the phone. And who she hears on the other end is Bill Wilson. And Bill Wilson, I'm an alcoholic from New York. Do you happen to know of another drunk that I could help? And she says, this is manna. And we had a cool thing after where Paige learned what manna meant, because I was looking at the wrong thing. It was the bread. And this gift from God. I remember Eileen putting in the chat, bread. And I'm like, I have no context for that comment. But that daily bread, that this is an answered prayer, that daily bread. You see, what had happened is they saw that Dr. Bob was struggling. They saw that he was drowning. And what they did was they had a prayer group for him. Now, it was described as a prayer group, and I have no doubt that they prayed for him. They prayed all over him, I'm sure. But they also shared with them their struggles. They were transparent about, man, here's where I'm struggling. Here's where I fell short. Here's how God moved me through that. And a couple weeks later, on the other end of the receiver, is Bill Wilson. A stock speculator, an out-of-work stock speculator from New York City. You know what I mean? And that is the answered prayer. And again, last week we were talking about, if we're ever struggling with the idea that there could be a God or there could be a loving God, man, it is a gentle reminder that there is not we have all had people in our lives who have prayed for our sobriety. There's nobody here who hasn't had that. Go ask your family. Go ask your loved ones. Have they ever? Go ask, if you were in the meetings and left, and we're gone. Go ask some of those people. Did you ever pray for me? I guarantee. And so the fact that our own sobriety is evidence of an answered prayer. And how miraculous it is that more than that, we get to be an extension of the hand of God, the love of God, an answer to the prayers of others. We get to carry this message to others and be a small part in the miracle of others. So Henrietta Seiberling then connects Bill Wilson to Ann Smith, Dr. Bob's wife. And I just want to point out, this is the 1930s. If any of those calls are missed, 1935, any of these calls are missed, what happens? We don't have answering machines. We don't have pagers. Some of you remember pagers. We don't have call forwarding. We don't have call waiting. In fact, I don't know this for a fact. This is a history husband question. I don't know this for a fact, but I feel like some of those lines have got to be on a party line. Anyone remember those? Yeah. And so if any of those calls are missed, might we not be here? And I'm not going to, I don't have time, and I don't have cognitive capacity at the moment, but even the history of how the Oxford group came to Akron, Ohio, and the influence of the Oxford group in Akron, Ohio. I mean, all of it just points to something we couldn't have done on our own. It was not done by willpower. It is done by seconds and inches. And not our very lives evidence of seconds and inches. Seconds we didn't earn, and inches we did not deserve. Is not our very life evidence of that. It's not the history of Alcoholics Anonymous evidence of that. Anywho, it goes on to say, about this time a lady called up my wife one Saturday afternoon saying she wanted me to come over that evening to meet a friend of hers who might help me. It was the day before Mother's Day. I want to throw that out because that is going to really color the picture of what we're going to read. We're just gonna have a hue. It was the day before Mother's Day. Ann Smith is a mother. Dr. Bob, this is how he responds to the day before Mother's Day. Thoughtful man. It said, and I had come home plastered, carrying a big potted plant, which I set down on the table and forthwith went upstairs and passed out. And I love that because the visual that I have is, if you've ever outside of restaurants, when they have those big planters. I don't think this is historically accurate. This is the spice that I'm adding. But I imagine it's one of those. And I imagine in front of Dr. Bob's house, it's actual cobblestone streets. I imagine by the time he got it back to his house with the cobblestones, it had a big crack in it. And so this is my visual. There's potting soil all the way up the stairs in the house, into the kitchen there. And he's his little footprints because he's tracked the soil all the way up the stairs and passed out in bed with the shoes on. That's my visual. Does that sound like a Mother's Day that we might be familiar with? Absolutely. It's just such a beautiful visual. So it says, the next day she called again, and wishing to be polite, though I felt very badly, I said, let's make the call. And I extracted from my wife a promise that we would not stay over 15 minutes. And I'm going to point out a couple things. Oh, no worries. Have a wonderful night. You take care. So the first thing I want to point out is they meet on May 12th of 1935. And that is Mother's Day. But also, now this is a callback way back to page 1 in Bill's story. There's a tombstone with the Hampshire Grenadier. And I'm going to see if because I do have that picture on my desktop. I'm going to see if I can grab that real quick. I can't. But that date of May 12th is on the tombstone. And it's just one of those, is that a coincidence? Maybe. Maybe. Or maybe that's just God trying to stay anonymous. Going to throw that out there. So that when he says, I'll do it, it's probably because he messed up Mother's Day. You know, it really is one of those, I'm not willing to do things unless I gotta like try to atone for my big mess up, in which case, okay, yeah, but he's like no more than 15 minutes. And why would he have a time limit on that? Keep in mind, he's tried everything that he could think of. He's tried every avenue that he could possibly muster, and none of it has worked. Have I felt like that? Now I didn't try everything, but everything that I tried failed. So we entered her house, and that's the Gatehouse in Akron, Ohio, at exactly 5 o'clock. It was 11:15 when we left. So much for that 15 minutes, eh? 11:15 when I left. I had a couple shorter talks with this man afterward and stopped drinking abruptly. So this is when he had that first conversation, and Bill Wilson explains to him what it means to be an alcoholic, the allergy of the body and the obsession of the mind. And he explains the solution, the spiritual awakening. That's what we read. And he's like, yes, I agree, I need that. And then he outlines the course of action, which had been taken from the Oxford group. And remember, Dr. Bob says, absolutely, I will do anything, not amends. So that's right there. That's where we're picking up. Willing to do anything, not amends, not willing to do that. And it says, this dry spell lasted for about 3 weeks. Then I went to Atlantic City to attend several days meeting of a natural, I'm not reading well today. Then I went to Atlantic City to attend a several days meeting of a national society of which I was a member. So there is some historical rabbit holes to go down with this. So it is commonly believed that this medical conference held in Atlantic City was June 10th to the 14th of 1935. Now, you might notice, wait a minute, his sobriety lasts until this conference. Don't we celebrate June 10th, 1935 as Dr. Bob's sobriety date? Well, so it's tough because sometimes the historical things, it like changes, so you got to be on your toes with it. But the leading theory is that they just got the date wrong. And you know what? We'll do that. Alcoholics get their sobriety date wrong? Absolutely. And honestly, my sobriety date is my best estimate. I picked, I made, November 17th is what I didn't pick, but it was a little, I know this might not be a shocker, it was a little fuzzy getting sober. And I wasn't sure exactly what day. So I picked the one that I'm like, I was definitely sober on the 17th. And so, yeah, we missed a week. Does that matter? No, not really. No, not really. And we celebrate June 10th as our founding date, not when Bill Wilson gets sober, but when Dr. Bob gets sober. Not when there's one, but when there's two. The first, and I'll use this phrase loosely, successful 12-step call. And so, but there, I was hanging out after a meeting with a lot of historians. Some of them might not have even been married. I'm making a history husband's joke. That's what I'm doing. But somebody was talking about it's possible that there might have been a proctologist-specific conference, not a big general medical one, but a more specific one that might have happened the week that a week earlier, or a period of time earlier. So who knows? Stay tuned. The history. All right. Either way, does the date really matter? No. Here's what really matters. It says, I drank all the scotch they had on the train and bought several quarts on my way to the hotel. So when he takes that first drink, what kicked in for him but the obsession of the mind? Because he had done some of the work, not all of the work. Right? He had no effective defense against that first drink. And so when he follows the scotch with when he drank all the scotch he had on they had on the train, and then quarts on his way, a couple quarts of it on the way to hotel, that is the allergy kicking off, and we're gonna see him go on this spree, and it is a spree. Now, this was on Sunday. I got tight that night, and this is, I believe, the second time we've used the phrase tight. Now, he's not toning his abs or going to Pilates class. Again, I've got nothing against Pilates. I'm just teasing. But tight does not mean that. Tight means drunk. And we're going to see some more euphemisms for drunk. But I got tight that night, stayed sober Monday till after dinner, then proceeded to get tight again. I drank all I dared in the bar, and then went to my room to finish the job. Listen, I'm not an alcoholic. I'm just really good at finishing jobs. I did have a drinking career. You know, you can't climb that corporate ladder without finishing a job or two. That's just me making puns, and I'm not even done yet, and I apologize. All right. It says, so Tuesday, I started in the morning getting well organized by noon. I'm not an alcoholic. I'm just into organization. Getting well organized. So I did not want to disgrace myself. So I checked out. I bought some more liquor on the way to the depot. I had to wait some time for the train. I remember nothing from then on until I woke up at a friend's house near home. Now, I don't know where this piece of information came from. I wrote it in my book forever ago. So if this is wrong, that's cool. Like, I'm open, because I'm so open if it's like, hey, it wasn't that. But because it bothers me that I don't remember where I got this from. Oh, yay, absolutely. Stiff, another way to describe tight, which is kind of funny because when you're drinking, you're typically not stiff nor tight. Things are pretty loose. Pretty loose on this caboose. Alrighty. I started that sentence. I'm like, I didn't need to finish it. Alrighty. So it says, when I woke up at a friend's house in a town near home. Now, the note that I have is that it was Lily, his office receptionist. So I don't stand much, but I always stand to be corrected if that's not true. But if it's not true, it's such a good story. So could you imagine? This is a guy, and he's like, I cannot make any amends because it's going to affect my business. And I need to be an upstanding proctologist, a colorectal surgeon. I need to be seen in the highest regard. I cannot make my amends. And as a result, he gets drunk and shows up absolutely hammered in a several-day blackout to his employee's house. That is what we call in the corporate world an oopsie-doopsies. Yeah, that's a big one. That's the technical term. And it says, these good people notified my wife, who sent my newly made friend, that's Bill Wilson, over to get me. He came and got me home to bed, gave me a few drinks that night, and 1 bottle of beer the next morning. And so what happens? Now, I think what we'll do is, why don't we go back and let's go finish this part of the story on page 155. So what happens? So page 155, very bottom paragraph. I know I said I would bounce this around, and we might even, like, if I do well for time, and I've never been known to do that, we might even go back and finish the last bit of Dr. Bob's Nightmare. You have an eye on it. I'm just not good at it. Alrighty, so 155, bottom paragraph. Being intrigued, however, he invited our friend Bill Wilson to his home sometime later, and just as he thought he was getting control of his liquor situation, he went on a roaring bender. For him, this was the spree that ended all sprees. He saw he would have to face his problem squarely, that God might give him mastery. And it says one morning he took the bull by the horns. So that was that morning. They gave him 2 bottles of beer and a goofball. So probably a benzo. Because you know what's not good for surgery? Hand tremors. And I will say, this turning point in Dr. Bob's life, I don't know what happened to the patient. I'm just kidding. I'm sure the history people, if there was like a loss, they would have found it. I'm sure the patient's okay. You know, who knows what it was. All right. But one morning I took the bull by the horns, and one morning he took the bull by the horns and set out to tell those he feared what his trouble had been. He found himself surprisingly well received and learned that many knew of his drinking. What a shock! What a shock that was not a big, deep secret. Stepping into his car, he made the rounds of people he had hurt. He trembled as he went about, and if you've made amends, man, you know that pre-amends anxiety. And that will just get the digestive situation moving. You know what I mean? It's AA, meat, and coffee, and go make amends. If you're feeling a little backed up, you don't need prune juice. Just go make those amends you don't want to make. That'll do it. So, he trembled as he went about, for this might mean ruin, particularly to a person in his line of business. And that is when Dr. Bob went on, and I call it this is not the technical term, an amender. So to prevent himself from going on a bender, what did he have to do? He had to go on a amender. So he went out and very quickly made all of his amends. And I point this out because it says, at midnight, he came home exhausted, but very happy. He has not had a drink since. Permanent sobriety is invariably on the other side of the thing that I don't want to do. Almost invariably. And I point this out because, yeah, it doesn't take long to make amends. It doesn't take long to go through them. And I also have I made a little like metal the music metal, like Dr. Bob in a leather jacket. It's just like amender, because I think that's funny. And when I work with my sponsees, sometimes I put them, and we call them amenders, in these like competitions to see who can make their amends, like who's the first person to get 5 amends done, and I do that because it works and it helps us move through the amends quickly. If you have experience with amends, you know taking my time builds fear. I'm not saying that we don't take care. We can move through the amends very carefully, very thoughtfully. We can be prepared, and it doesn't take long. It does not take long to reach out to some of these people, and that's what he did. So, and I'll point out, he goes on a relapse. And what does he do? He picks up where he was unwilling to go. So he goes on a relapse and goes back and makes his amends. So I point that out because I allude to, when we're in Two Wives, I talk about 3 places in the book where it gives us directions on what to do if we've relapsed after coming in contact to Alcoholics Anonymous. And this is the 3rd place. Do the amends I don't want to make. Take the action I was avoiding. That's what I got to do. So he has not had a drink since. So permanent sobriety. As we shall see, he now means a great deal to his community, and the major liabilities of 30 years of hard drinking have been repaired in 4. And it didn't take him 4 years to work the steps or make his amends. He was able to repair them very, very quickly. But he became that person that he always wanted to be. And that person that meant more to the community than if he was just trying to be a white-knuckle colorectal surgeon. So I figured, with the time we have left, before we get into the history and talking about AA number 3, so on page 156, we're going to talk about the need that they had to keep spiritually active, to work with others, to try and carry this message to others. But I figure, why don't we finish off Dr. Bob's nightmare? Just for a sense of continuity. Or you could say no, Paige. I was going to say I'd take requests, but that's probably not true. Alrighty, let's pop over page 180. So he makes his amends, and we're going to go back, first full paragraph. That was June 10th, 1935. Probably as late as June 17th, 1935, unless some of the history homies have found like a proctology conference that happened a little earlier. So that was June 10th, 1935. And that was my last drink. As I write, nearly 4 years have passed. The question which might naturally come into your mind would be, what did the man do or say that was different from what the others had done or said? It must be remembered that I had read a great deal and talked to everyone who knew or thought they knew anything about the subject of alcoholism. But this was a man who had experienced many years of frightful drinking, who had most all the drunkard's experiences known to man, but had been cured by the very means I had been trying to employ, that is to say, the spiritual approach. And so what we're pointing to is, of course, this is the first guy that Dr. Bob met that had a solution, that was an alcoholic and had recovered as the result of this approach. And so we learned from somebody where he had that commonality, the allergy of the body, the obsession of the mind. But I also want to point out Bill Wilson had that experience with the course of action that later became our 12 steps. So he didn't just have experience with his alcoholism and was dry, but he had experience with the 12 steps to bring about a spiritual awakening. And that's what we have to offer, our experience with our alcoholism, our experience with the 12 steps, and our experience with the spiritual awakening and what it is like to live as a human being who is also recovered, but still human, to live there in that fourth dimension. So it says, he gave me information about the subject of alcoholism, which was undoubtedly helpful. Of far more importance was the fact that he was the first living human with whom I had ever talked, who knew what he was talking about in regards to alcoholism from actual experience. In other words, he talked my language. He knew all the answers, and certainly not because he had picked them up in his reading. No, it was his lived experience. This whole thing is about experience. It is a most wonderful blessing to be relieved of the terrible curse with which I was afflicted. My health is good. I have regained my self-respect and the respect of my colleagues, which, good for him. It's like, but he couldn't try it. Like, what I'm kind of making a joke about is he couldn't put the cart before the horse. He couldn't go around and try to manage his image. He had to take the course of action. And as a result, all of those things fell into place. He says, my home life is ideal, and my business is as good as can be expected in these uncertain times. We're in the midst of the Great Depression and probably at the time of writing, just starting to get out of it, but still many years in the Great Depression. I spend a great deal of time passing on what I learned to others who want it and need it badly. There are a lot of people who need it badly, but there's unfortunately fewer that want it, right? I do it for 4 reasons. And my former home group, we would read this near the end of every meeting. And we would ask, people who are available to sponsor to raise your hand. And we would read this. And this talks about like why we work with others, why we sponsor others, why we carry this message. The first is, 1, a sense of duty. And there is a sense of duty, like a sense of responsibility. But it's more than just, and honestly, that's the order. We do it because we have to, because my sponsor's making me. That's why most of us do it at the start. 2, it is a pleasure. And we can only know that that's true by doing it. Because if you have not sponsored anyone, I promise you are thinking, that does not sound like that's the case. A pleasure? Come on. But we know that from experience. 2, it is a pleasure. 3, because in so doing, I am paying my debt to the man who took time to pass it on to me. And I love that idea of I owe Alcoholics Anonymous a debt. And I love it because we don't have any spiritual debt collectors. There's nobody that's going to, and actually I've done this at an in-person meeting where I'm like, what Paige, what happened? It's like, I wasn't willing to help the newcomer. They took my kneecaps. I don't do that so much anymore because there's audible groans and discomfort, but every once in a while, spicing it up. But I owe Alcoholics Anonymous a debt, and it is a debt I could never repay, because the more I pay it back, the more I try to help the newcomer, the more I'm of service. Wouldn't you know, I'm given more than I ever put in. And because every time I do, I take out a little more insurance against a possible slip. Time and time and time again, it tells me if I want permanent contented sobriety, I got to work with others. I got to carry this message to others. I've got to, if I want that. Those are four pretty good reasons to work with others. He says, unlike most of our crowd, I did not get over my craving for liquor much during the first 2.5 years of abstinence. Now, it's interesting. This is, I think, the second time in his story. We didn't read the first time. We're just doing the second half of Dr. Bob's Nightmare. But he uses the word craving, and he actually uses it differently than how we use it in Alcoholics Anonymous. When we use the word craving, we're only talking about the allergy. But I believe when he's talking about craving, what he's talking about is more a desire. He wasn't fully freed from this desire. He was still feeling this like, it's on me. And I don't want to call it the obsession of the mind, because I got nothing against the obsession of the mind. But here's what his defense was. It says, it was almost always with me, but at no time have I been anywhere near yielding. And here's Dr. Bob. Now, I'm sure the numbers are exaggerated, but he lived until, I believe it was, he was sober 16 years before he passed away of cancer, I believe. And in that time, he's credited with sponsoring like 5,000 people. Now, some of that probably was more like he got them into the hospital, like admissions. But he was prolific in his work sponsoring others and working with others. And what he was doing in Akron was working, and Bill was kind of still fumbling around with it. Like Dr. Bob's, he's doing it, and it's working. And that was what allowed him to have a defense, even though it was still hard for him. And I was talking about, like, when all my big book studies run together in my little brain, but I was talking about this at Monday's study, where it's like sometimes the pain that we have is driving us to the God that we need. So he might not have been as prolific in his 12-step work if he did not have that sensation and that feeling. And has that not been my experience? That the pain I experience, and it has been, the pain that I've experienced in my sobriety it's been substantial. And that has driven me to the God that I needed. And the God that I need. We're not going to pass test that one. I need present tense, you know? And it says, I used to get terribly upset when I saw my friends drink and knew I could not. But I schooled myself to believe that though I once had the same privilege, I had abused it so frightfully that it was withdrawn. And it's this idea that it's like everybody has a certain limit of alcohol that they're allowed to drink safely for their lifetime. He just hit it before he hit 20, that sort of joke. And it says, and I love, this is one of my faves. So it doesn't behoove me to squawk about it. But you know what does behoove me? Inventory. Inventory behooves me. I have that on a hoodie, but not the one that I'm wearing right now. But that would have been perfect if I tied it in. So, for after all, nobody ever had to throw me down and pour liquor down my throat. He goes on to say, if you think you are an atheist or an agnostic, a skeptic, or have some form of intellectual pride which keeps you from accepting what is in this book, I feel sorry for you. Because it's often we hear there's nobody that's too dumb to get this thing, but there are people that are too smart. And that's not my experience. I don't think anyone is too smart to get this thing. But I think we're too smart. Because I am dying under the lash of alcoholism, and I'm holding on to this intellectual pride that I don't want to try your method, even though it's working. And I know a lot of people might read this as condescension, but I don't think it's condescension. I don't feel that in my heart with not that me and Dr. Bob are homies. Well, I'd like to think so. But just how he was. And I think it's more when you work with a lot of people and you're trying to, be a small part in their miracle, knowing that their life is at stake. And it's like, man, if you just get over that hump, that thing that feels so great but is not really a barrier. It says, if you still think you are strong enough to beat the game alone, that is your affair. But if you really and truly want to quit drinking liquor for good and all, I sincerely feel that you must have some help. We know that we have an answer for you. We have a solution. That's what he's saying. That's what he's promising. And it says, it never fails. It never fails. This is a money back guarantee. This is 100%. It never fails if, and we're seeing some promises, if you go about it with one half the zeal you have been in the habit of showing when you were getting another drink. The effort that we're putting into drinking, if we put half that effort into these 12 steps as a way of life, we will have this experience. And this is another promise. You're a capital H, capital F. If you don't like I point out the capitalizations because they are synonyms for words that we could use for God. But it says your heavenly Father will never let you down. God, higher power, the creator, the spirit of the universe that you are most open to, will never let you down. And I think that's definitely over time and a good place to leave it. Over to you, Vivian.
That just